probably gathered by now that the Gospel of John is one of my favourite places in the Bible. And what's so different to Matthew, Mark and Luke, they were really eyewitness accounts of what these disciples saw Jesus doing and saying, whereas John's Gospel is this really rich imagery of why Jesus did things. So it's in John's Gospel that we start to see a better understanding of the nature of God. We see God as Father, Son and Holy Spirit, all working together in perfect unity. And last week we looked at John chapter 14, and verse 23 is one of my favourite verses, where it says that the Father will love us and will come to us and make our home with us. I just love that image of God being at home with us. In all our imperfections, God is actually quite happy to be with us. I love that. And of course, this new ministry of the Holy Spirit, in verse 26, it talks about the Holy Spirit will be like the advocate who the Father will send and will teach us all things and remind us of everything that Jesus said. So there's this great new ministry of the Holy Spirit that's emerging. And Jesus, of course, was appointing the church towards the day of Pentecost, when there would be a new gathering of disciple makers. So Jesus was raising up a movement of disciples who would actually pass on the stories, but also introduce people to this new relationship with the Father, who desperately wants all people to be saved and to know him, and to know the fullness of knowing him. So we're going to look at John chapter 17 in this teaching. We're going to read from verses 13 down to 19. And this is a picture of Jesus praying in the garden before going to the cross. And because I just love the rich detail that John puts in. And I suspect, I could be wrong, but I think that a lot of this content in John is post-resurrection appearances where Jesus met with the disciples and really began to unpack what's going on here. So in John we see this way bigger picture, which I absolutely love, about what Jesus was doing with his disciples and really what he's doing for us. So let's look at John chapter 17 and verse 13. And he says, I'm coming to you now, and he's praying to God the Father, I'm coming to you now, but I say these things while I am still in the world, so that they, his disciples, may know and have the full measure of my joy within them. So here's the first thing that Jesus really wants for his disciples, that he wants for us, is that we would be people filled with his joy, that we would live with energy and vitality and freshness, and just that life for us would be full of all the good things that God has for us. He wants us to have this fullness of life. And we are blessed. And I think the more we focus on how good God has been to us, the more the goodness of God changes us and overflows to others, because we are blessed to be a blessing. So Jesus, firstly, for his disciples, wants us to know the joy that comes from him. Verse 13. Verse 14 says, I've given them your word, and the world has hated them. Now here we have Jesus giving his word. Jesus is the living word. He has given us the written word, and we encourage each other with the spoken word. So these are all the words of Jesus that Jesus wants us to embrace and be transformed by the word. So a disciple of Jesus, or a follower of Jesus, is someone who is so filled, so focused on his words and sharing his words that it changes our perception and our value system on how we see the world. Verse 14 goes on to say, for they are not of the world any more than I am of the world. My prayer is not that you take them out of the world, but you protect them from the evil one. Now Jesus is starting to create an image of the sent church. So he's saying we actually don't live in the world anymore. And I love there was an early Salvation Army phrase that says that we are in the world, but not of the world. In other words, because of our relationship with Jesus, we are not victims of all the forces that throw people about, all the comings and goings of our world. We actually live by a different value system, a different belief system. Our values are centered on different things, so we're separate to the world we live in. But Jesus wasn't training his disciples to go live in church world. We gather together as his people, but disciples of Jesus are trained and equipped to go into the world with this different story of Jesus, this different value system. So verse 15, my prayer is not that you take them out of the world, but you protect them from the evil one. So this work of Jesus in us and through us is that we would take his good news stories to others, and we would be protected as we go among the world from the influences of the evil one. Verse 16, they are not of the world, even as I am not of it. Sanctify them by the truth. Your word is truth. So here we are, people restored, renewed, focused, inspired by the living word of Jesus, the written word of Jesus, encouraged by the spoken word of Jesus. And verse 19 says, for them I sanctify myself, that they too may be truly sanctified. Now the word sanctification is a significant theological word, which is really about being transformed internally and externally. It's really about an integration of transforming. It's not just doing good things, it's actually being transformed to be good. And this is obviously not our power, this is the power of the Holy Spirit. So the key focus for us as the people of Jesus is to actually truly embrace the ministry of the Holy Spirit. So the Holy Spirit who is all around us, the Holy Spirit who comes within us, the Holy Spirit who flows through us, and the Holy Spirit who falls upon us. And we'll talk more about that in sessions to come. But this is all about the ministry of the Holy Spirit. So if our focus is just on the cross, and the cross, there is nothing without the cross. So the cross of Jesus makes this possible. Without the cross, none of this is possible. So the death and resurrection of Jesus is the key story, but it's not the end of the story. The story goes on now to about the ministry of the Holy Spirit. And there's this verse in Romans chapter 15, verse 13, which I love. It says, may the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, so you may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit.